Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Brad Anderson. I am the State Director of AARP Iowa, and today we are going to learn, we're 24 days out from the caucuses? And so today we're going to learn about how to participate in the Iowa caucuses. Our goal today is to educate you all on how to participate and also prove to you that participating in the Iowa caucuses is actually very, very easy. We have Billy Webb from the Iowa Republican Party, and then Kevin Geiken from the Iowa Democratic Party. I'll let them introduce themselves briefly. Billy?
Hi, I'm Billy Webb. I'm the 3rd District Regional Political Director for the Republican Party of Iowa.
I'm Kevin Geiken. I'm the Executive Director with the Iowa Democratic Party.
Great. So, here's the deal. I'm just going to lay out some basics for you, and then we'll kind of get into more specifics. But here are the basics. Caucus night is February 3rd. It's on a Monday. Caucus is open at 7 o'clock, and you have to be present for the most part to caucus unless you're in the military. Am I right about that?
Correct.
Okay. Also, it's important to note that caucuses are a party-run activity, so they're not an officially sanctioned election through the state, but they're a party-run activity. And again, some people have been, over the years, kind of intimidated, especially new people, about what does it mean to caucus, what's the process, and they've been kind of scared off by wanting to participate. But our message is participating in the Iowa caucuses is very, very easy, and we encourage you to do so. And ARP members in the 50-plus population participate at a great rate. And so what that means is 60% of the Iowa caucus goers are actually going to be over the age of 50. Now, when I tell people, reporters, political folks, that 60% of caucus goers are over the age of 50, they're actually surprised. I mean, they don't, because a lot of focus is on, how do we get younger voters and all this, but over a majority of the people who participate will be over the age of 50 years old. And so our goal is to continue that progress at AARP, make sure that AARP members, anyone over the age of 50 participate, because what that means is when you do participate, politicians pay more attention to you. And so you get your issues that you care about focused on, like healthcare and Medicare and the cost of prescription drugs and Social Security and all that stuff. So if you are over the age of 50, if you're not, bottom line is please participate. Now, we're going to get right into it. I think what we're going to do is start with you, Kevin, and then Billy. So it's participating in the on the Republican side is different than the Democratic side. And so we're going to walk you through what each of those processes are like, and then answer any questions that you may have. So Kevin, let's start with you. So why don't you walk us through just the basics of how can you participate in the Democratic caucuses, and what do folks need to participate?
Great question. I want to echo what Brad said. Caucusing is easy, so keep that in mind as we walk through kind of the Democratic process. The basics, February 3rd of this year, it is a Monday night. You have to be there by 7 o'clock p.m., and you have to caucus in your precinct location. So the area where you're registered to vote, you're assigned a precinct location. It might be different from where your general election polling location is, so make sure you're doing your homework now to figure out what your caucus site is. On our side, you can find that out by going to our website, thecaucuses.org, and using a lookup tool there to figure out where you should caucus. You have to be registered, in our case, as a Democrat in the state of Iowa to participate. You can also, though, change your registration on caucus night. If you need to do that, if you have to become a Democrat, if you're currently not, or if you need to register at a new location, we encourage you to get there early, so sometime between 6 p.m. and 6:30 p.m., just so you have enough time to do that. But again, the hard and fast rule is you have to be there by 7 o'clock p.m. In order to participate. The only things that you need to bring to a caucus are fun, positive attitude, maybe a candidate if you've got one picked out, although most Iowans don't right now. And this is one of those very sort of quirky caucus things on our side. Bring a pen with you, because we've introduced presidential preference cards this year, and I'm happy to talk about those in a bit. But in terms of what to bring yourself, bring your ability to talk about issues that are important to you with your neighbors, and bring a pen.
And bring a pen. Don't forget your pen. I'm sure there'll be extra pens if
will,
you don't have a pen.
There will be some extra pens, yes.
Well, that's an awesome overview. Thank you, Kevin. Billy, anything different there, or walk us through on the Republican side?
So there are some similarities. We do start at a firm 7 o'clock start time. I would say arrive as early as possible, and you can look up your precinct. Your precinct, if you aren't sure where that is, we recommend going to the Iowa Secretary of State's website, and then you can go to the iowagop.org to find your caucus location, knowing your precinct.
Great, great. Well, and it should be known, by the way, I mean, all the action right now publicly is on the Democratic side, and that's natural because there's an incumbent Republican president. But our message is, whether you are a Republican or a Democrat, please plan on participating in the caucuses because, there's some party business that gets done. Plus, it's just, again, once again, a way for you to make your voice heard. And this is one of the greatest democratic processes in America right now. So be a part of history by participating. So I want to talk with you, Kevin, a little bit about what, if you are new to the Iowa caucuses and you're participating for the first time, or maybe you haven't participated in a while, walk us through, okay, you get there, what does it look like? I mean, what are you going to be doing when you're there?
It's a great question. And I'll separate this out into sort of two different phases of the caucus because it's important to talk about what the first part looks like, which is just getting into the caucus. As I've already mentioned, in order to participate, it's a partisan process. So in order to participate in our caucus, you have to be a registered Democrat. Every caucus site, 1,679 locations across Iowa, will have a list of all the registered Democrats in the precincts. If you're already registered as a Democrat, you'll walk to a check-in line, give the volunteer there your last name, and they'll sign you up. Very similar to what happens in a general election. Once that's done, then you'll move into the caucus room. If you are not on that list, it means that you're not on our rules or the Secretary of State's rules as a registered Democrat in Iowa. Not a big deal. You can fill out a voter registration form there at the caucus site and then proceed into the caucus, assuming you've registered as a Democrat in that particular precinct. So in terms of the check-in process, that's that. We do have a new feature this year, an early check-in process. You can learn more about that at thecaucuses.org. So if you are already a registered Democrat in your precinct in the state of Iowa, you can check in early, which just helps speed up that process in the line.
Like TSA pre-check.
A little bit like TSA pre-check, a little less scrutiny, and you don't have to pay the $85.
There you go. It's a free TSA pre-check.
It is. If you don't have the TSA pre-check, we're not going to pat you down at the door, so you don't have to worry about that either. Once you're inside the caucus room, then I think the biggest thing to remember about caucuses and to keep in mind is that what caucuses are, it's a meeting of neighbors, in our case, Democratic neighbors in your precinct, to discuss, to debate, and then ultimately to decide on a few things that you want to focus on moving ahead into the next general election. So with this concept of caucuses being neighbors talking to neighbors, our system looks a lot like that. When you walk into the caucus room for your precincts, most likely this year, you'll see a bunch of signs from all the different campaigns. You'll see campaign supporters wearing their t-shirts and their stickers. You'll probably get asked to wear 15 different stickers on the way in the door. Unless you're wearing one when you come in, that might save you some trouble there if you have your candidate picked out already. But at that point, technically there's no division. You can sit anywhere, stand anywhere. Most caucus goers, though, if they have a candidate picked out, they'll generally gravitate towards the part of the room where their candidate has clearly set up shop. There'll be some introductory party business then for about 15 to 20 minutes just to get the caucus started. Our caucuses cannot start before 7 o'clock p.m. So again, you have to be there by 7 o'clock p.m. Once all that party business is out of the way, then the fun part starts with presidential preferencing. I'll spare us a lot of the in the weeds details, unless of course we want to go into
spare us the details.
The basic gist of it for the caucus goer is this: you will have an opportunity to go, and where our case is different than the Republicans' caucus is. In ours, you have to actually visibly go support your candidate. So for caucus goers that are able to stand and walk, you will stand and walk to the corner of the room where your candidate is set up. So every candidate will have a spot designated for them. Again, if you're able, stand and walk over there during what's called an alignment period. The other big difference that we have over the Republicans that is important to know about caucusing is anybody can get delegates in a caucus, whether you're a candidate who's been campaigning here for 2 years or whether you're Mickey Mouse. Anybody can get delegates as long as you have a certain viability threshold, meaning you get enough people in your caucus to also support your candidate of choice. So what will happen for you as a caucus goer is at some point during the night, the preference group leader, or the leader of the caucus rather, will say, if you're supporting candidate X, go over here, candidate Y, go over here. If you're able, you'll physically stand up, walk over to that group. If at that point you have at least 15% of everyone else in the room standing with you and supporting your candidate, you're viable and you'll get delegates, and your process is done. This year you can't actually move on to another choice. It's a little bit of a different rule. If, though, you're standing with a candidate that doesn't have 15% support, meaning you're not viable, you get another chance. You have one more opportunity to go what's called realign with a group that is viable, maybe convince some other people who aren't viable to join you to make your candidate viable so that you can get delegates elected. Once that process is done, your group will actually elect the people going on to the county convention, and then it's the last 20, 30 minutes of the caucus is party business. And I don't want to gloss over the party business part, because for groups like yours that have policies that you're talking about and very specific programs that you want to mention, we have a platform process, and I believe the Republicans do as well. We have a platform process where you can help dictate what the Iowa Democratic Party talks about and fights for over the next election cycle. And so I would encourage you all to stick around for the platform process, submit planks that are important to the AARP community.
Great, great. Well, that's an excellent. So Kevin is one of the best trainers in the business, by the way. So you've gone through that explanation more than once. But I will say, if you're new to the process, literally you check in and you go stand somewhere. I mean, and it is important. You can get as involved in the weeds and the math as you like, or you can just check in and go stand somewhere. Now, it is important if you're undecided going into the caucuses, and you go and you say, all right, I'm going to go stand with the undecided crew. And that undecided crew does have viability, so they get 15%. You're kind of stuck at undecided. So, I think it is important for folks to know that going in, so and not to be surprised by that fact. Now, Billy, your process is much different, and we've joked about this because your explanation is probably going to be like 30 seconds. So walk our viewers through what it means so you show up at the Republican side. What does that caucus look like?
So show up, again, we do start at 7 o'clock. Your first order of business is going to be to elect a permanent chair and secretary for the caucus. That's usually a pretty quick process because we have trained people in advance, and that's generally who stays on to lead the caucus. After that, our first order of business is the presidential preference vote. We will have representatives from all three campaigns. It could be a campaign person or even just somebody there that's a supporter speaking on behalf of that candidate. They're usually given about 2 to 3 minutes to speak. Our votes are written on generally a blank ballot. Some precincts will have ballots already written, but you can really write any name that you want on there. Those ballots are then counted in front of the body, and those results will be reported. So it is different than the Democrats, that it is a secret ballot. After that, moving on, we will elect people to local central committees. It's generally 2 people per precinct, depending on population. Then moving on to delegates for county convention, which if you're interested in going to the district or state convention, that is where you get started. We also then have a platform segment in our caucus, and that is a great way to get issues you care about talked about in the Republican Party, and I think really that's direct democracy that we have. Another thing to keep in mind is there's going to be a lot of petitions going around to support candidates running for various offices, anything from county offices up to federal level. So you'll probably be asked to sign a few times, and that is more than welcome.
Yeah, that's a good point. Petitions. One question I have for both of you is, I know there are some deadlines that are important to meet, and specifically I'm talking about the voter registration deadline, but I know you can register in person. So walk us through walk us through some of the deadlines that people should be thinking of, like right now, as we're 24 days out.
Yeah. At this point on our side, our deadlines come from the fact that the caucuses are still a pretty paper-centric process, and so we literally print the list of every registered Democrat in the state and send it out to all of the precincts. Again, similar to what happens in a general election, we don't have taxpayer dollars to help support the effort, so our timelines are a little bit longer, and so the voter registration deadline for us has really already passed. By that we mean if you were registered as a Democrat by December 31st of this year, you are guaranteed to be pre-printed on the rolls. In most counties in Iowa, if you registered yet by the end of this week, you'll still be able to get printed on our voter rolls, but it's not a guarantee. Not a big deal if you're not. If you haven't done that, if for some reason you're not on the voter rolls, again, not a big deal. It just means you'll have to fill out a voter registration form on caucus night. If you think you've already filled out a voter registration form and maybe it's sitting at the auditor's office and you're worried about filling it out twice, don't worry about it. The auditors will reconcile that at the end of the day.
Great.
The other deadlines, that we have this year, because we are implementing this early check-in process, which again is totally optional. The early check-in is not anything that you're required to do. If you do want to take advantage of the early check-in process, you can do so again on our website, thecaucuses.org. The deadline to check in early is January 17th, so a week from today.
Great. Any other deadlines to?
So for us, our voter rolls have been sent to the printer. So if you have not registered as a Republican yet between now and the caucuses, you will need to re-register the day of the caucus. But like Kevin said, that does not interrupt your registration at all. The auditor will get that figured out.
Great. So we do have a question actually from Annie, who asked this question on Facebook. For Democrats, if your first choice isn't viable in the first round, is there a record of that vote?
Yeah, that's a great question, Annie. Thank you for that. This year there is a record. We are instituting and bringing into the process something we're calling presidential preference cards. And we are also reporting on caucus night a new number that the party hasn't typically reported, which is that first expression number. And so what that means is, to Annie's question, on first alignment, you're over there standing with candidate X. Unfortunately, candidate X isn't viable, so you have to move to any number of other candidates. Under the old rules of the Democratic Party caucuses, the fact that you stood with candidate X at the beginning would never have been known. This year, however, it will be known. Your numbers will be reported in our final numbers. So in your particular precinct, when we report out publicly to the press and to the world, they will know that a certain number of people stood with candidate X at the end of that first alignment. They'll be able to see the math, of course, and realize candidate X wasn't viable, so then all of those people moved somewhere else. So if that happens to you, Annie, and you're standing with candidate X, you will be recorded as having been a supporter for candidate X, and then you'll show up in the second alignment numbers, which we also release publicly as now supporting candidate Y at that point. The presidential preference card is the written record of that.
Yeah.
We also have a new feature this year which allows us to do a recount. It allows campaigns to request a recount if they meet a certain threshold, and the presidential preference cards then become the way that we conduct a recount. And so for the caucus goer, after the first alignment, you'll fill out the first side of your presidential preference card saying I'm standing with candidate X. And then in this example, candidate X wasn't viable, so I moved to candidate Y. I flip it over and fill out side 2, and that becomes the paper record.
Great. Yeah, and I do have to give you guys credit because you have done a lot of work making sure that the sites are large enough, because there are estimates where anywhere from 250, 300,000 people are going to be showing up. These are record numbers for Iowa, and for those that have caucus in the past, some of those sites have been a little crammed when you get those kinds of numbers, but I believe you guys have taken that into account this time, and people can expect all the venues to comfortably hold all of the people that are showing up. Am I?
Yeah, that's where we started. We of course expected that this would be a big year. We are planning for record turnout. This is a critical area where both parties work together very closely, where Democrats and Republicans really work hand in hand. The Republican Party recognizing that there is a little more probably turnout on our side this year because there is an incumbent on the Republican side. The Republican Party has been very gracious to let us take the bigger spots in all of these precincts. So yeah, I mean, we started this process a year ago, finding locations, a little over a year ago, with that in mind. Let's find the biggest locations. To fully set expectations properly, expect that it might be a little crowded in there. In some areas, there's just not enough physical infrastructure to have it be a completely luxurious night for us. But so expect that there might be some crowding. Expect that there maybe might be some lines at the pre-registration area or the registration area rather. We're preparing for it. The other thing to keep in mind here is that these caucuses are run by volunteers. 1,679 plus volunteers doing this. So if your experience is anything less than perfect, keep that in mind. These are local volunteers volunteering for their local party. The other thing I want to mention this year that's another new thing that we've rolled out is a request for accommodation form. So with everything I've just said, that it might be a little crowded, there might be some lines, if you feel like there's a particular accommodation that you might need to have a more pleasant caucus experience, maybe it's that you need to guarantee there's a chair with a hard back or a chair with wheels, or maybe you have a service animal that you need to make sure can be allowed into the site, go to our website, thecaucuses.org. There's a form, a link at the bottom of every page there to request an accommodation. Let us know. We'll take your accommodation request, send it to your local precinct leader so that you can work out to make sure that whatever you need to have a comfortable experience is provided for you.
Excellent. Okay. So question for both of you. You're new to the caucuses. You check in at 7:30, but you've got a hot date at 8 o'clock. When is the earliest you can leave after your work is done? So I'll start with you, Billy.
Well, if you check in at 7:30, you're late.
Check in at 7. 7, thank you.
Anyway, so it starts at 7. You can really leave any time. We're not going to hold people hostage. I know in my past experiences, people tend to leave after the presidential preference vote. But really, the people that are going to stay longer, you're going to get more out of it, and you're going to have more input in the party.
Okay.
So you can leave.
Right. We encourage people to stick around, but you can. And if you're not viable that first time, could you just leave?
You could actually leave if you're viable as well. Again, the caveat being we encourage you to stay until the end. And it's hard to put a time certain on it because it really depends on when the caucus starts, how long it takes to do the preference grouping. That really depends on how many people are there. So it's impossible to put a certain time stamp on you can leave at this point. But in the process of things, you have to stay. You don't have to. I strongly encourage you to stay until the first alignment piece because that's what the presidential preferencing piece is all about. At the end of first alignment, there's a couple options that you'll have. If you're part of a non-viable group, sure, you can leave at that point, but you're removing your ability to actually have an impact on the presidential preferencing out of that group because you're not awarded any delegates. So if you're part of a non-viable group at the end of the first alignment, you actually probably now are committed to stay for another 30 minutes to get through the second alignment. If you're part of a viable group after first alignment, and this is another change this year compared to how we've done things previously, if you're part of a viable group after the first expression or that first alignment, you can leave at that point knowing that your numbers won't change. At the end of first alignment, you've created a floor for your candidate, and if all but one people leave at that point from that viable group, it doesn't change the math at all. You're still awarded that base level of delegates. So that to me suggests that you could leave after you get through the party business. We also elect the permanent leaders. That's about a 10-15 minute process for pre-party stuff. First alignment may take 15, 20, 30 minutes depending on how many bodies have to move around the room. So at that point you could leave within about 30 to 45 minutes, maybe an hour of getting there.
Great.
So your hot date should maybe start at 8:15.
8:15. Start your hot date at 8:15.
Right.
Got it. Okay, so one rule that we have at AARP is anyone who wears a quilted vest is required to pick the winner of the Iowa caucuses. So Billy, who's going to win on the Republican side?
On the Republican side, well, I cannot say, but I do know the ultimate winner is going to be anyone that shows up. I think we're going to have a great turnout, and it's going to, everyone's going to feel walking away feeling like their voices are heard, and it was a good night.
That's an amazing answer to that question. Well done. Kevin, who's going to win?
Yeah, I mean, Billy stole my answer. it really is. It's the volunteers. It's all of you that show up because it's, and again, in our caucus, the idea is it's neighbors talking to neighbors to plan out there. And we've got some incredible work ahead of us on our side, not just for the presidential election, although that's very important, but the planning for local elections start at these caucuses or continue at these caucuses. So the winner will be every Democrat who shows up and makes their voice heard and helps starts their journey to participate in this process.
Great. Caucusing is easy. One more time, websites. So you want to go and you want to check out where you are going to caucus. What website do you go on the Republican side?
iowagop.org.
Kevin?
On ours, our one-stop shop is thecaucuses.org.
Thecaucuses.org. And I'm trying to read this for both parties. Oh, yeah, okay, thank you. And one reminder, of course, for both parties, get there well before 7 o'clock because naturally there are going to be lines. I mean, there are going to be a lot of people participating. But if you get there before 7, you should have plenty of time to check in. But really, I encourage people to go to that pre-check because that is a great new feature from the Iowa Democratic Party, and that'll make things much smoother. But again, you don't have to, but check out that pre-check. Thank you guys so much. So this is one of the, in Washington, people think it's crazy that Republicans and Democrats can sit next to each other and have a rational conversation, but that's how we do things in Iowa. So thank you both for being here today and walking us through the process. Really do appreciate that. For any additional questions, you can either go to our Facebook page and ask a question at any time, and we'll be happy to answer it, or contact the parties directly, and I know they would also be happy to answer. So thank you for watching, and let us know if you have any questions, and do not forget to participate on caucus night, February 3rd. Thank you.